Hey guys, today I am working on this diptych on paper of some waves inspired by a hike that I did at Crystal Crescent Beach back before we had to be social distancing and back before the beaches were closed. So this is really loosely based on a photo that I took that day. I was out hiking with my friend Susan, and we stood for the longest time watching these waves crash up over the rocks at the end of one of the beaches there. I really miss hiking, and I really miss my friends. I miss seeing them in person, and my family. I'm really missing getting out to the ocean. So I thought I would paint these waves. They were so beautiful, and I remember being really captivated by the translucency of them, and just as I was watching them crash, just kind of seeing that beautiful tropical translucent green in the crest of the wave. And it was particularly wavy that day. It wasn't really windy, but there was definitely a swell in the ocean, and as it came upon the shore, just the way it broke, it was just like captivating, kind of mesmerizing. And I think both my friend Susan and I think we were both kind of we just wanted to stay and watch the beauty of these waves crashing and just the beauty of the water moving. I've been working on paper a lot still. I don't know why. I find it non-committal somehow. I find it like I don't have to invest a lot of time or energy into worrying about the exact composition or color scheme. I'm just kind of going for it, and I think I'm being a little bit more spontaneous with these works on paper. And one of the things that I mentioned in my last video, I think it was my last video, that I'm trying to be more loose with my brush strokes. It's something that I'm really striving for, and I actually think with this diptych, I think I achieved what I was going for. The beauty of doing a diptych like this is that I'm really treating the two pieces as one, because they're taped together. I can just paint over that tape that's down the center line and almost pretend like it's not even there. And then you have these two really cohesive works at the end that really flow together nicely. But you'll see they all also can stand alone as individual pieces. But I really like the way these two work together in the end. I'm using a flat brush. I find I've been using my flat brushes a lot, especially when I'm trying to work loosely like this. And I try to get a pretty big brush so that, compared to the size of the paper, so that I'm not being too detailed with it. I'm just going in and really just kind of focusing on the shapes that I'm seeing instead of what I think I'm seeing, and I'm really trying to just focus on the variations in color and the really loose shapes to bring in the appearance of translucency and then in the foreground more opaqueness, I guess, and reflectivity. So I'm using Liquitex acrylic paints and a paper that is actually Deserres brand, which is a local art supply shop here in Halifax. They're actually based in Quebec, Montreal maybe. And the paper is actually a watercolor paper by Fabriano. But I find it works really well for the acrylic that I'm using. Not that it's a particularly I'm not using it really wet here. It's, fairly dry, but the paint is, it's fairly thick, and it can definitely soak into the paper. And if I use a paper that is much thinner than this, there's definitely some buckling and some warping. But I do use acrylic. I use the Liquitex acrylic in my sketchbook, which is definitely a thinner paper, and I use it all the time, and it does eventually flatten out in my sketchbook as well. But I really like the way this watercolor paper handles the paint. So How are you guys spending your days? Are you still in quarantine? Are you in isolation? What's going on in the part of the world where you're living right now? How are you spending your days? Do you have kids? Are you trying to homeschool and work and get meals on the table and, just keep up with like your home as well? Are you trying to do all the things? How are you coping with all that? Are you finding time to be more creative during this time of isolation? I think at first it was really difficult for me. My brain didn't kind of know where to land. I didn't really know what to paint. I didn't know what I felt like creating. And it seems like these works on paper, I touched on the idea that they are less committal than a big work on canvas. And somehow I feel okay about creating them. I don't have to think about them too much. I just have been kind of going for it. I'll pick up, a reference photo from my phone that I took out in nature usually. And I'll use that as my inspiration and away I go. Are you finding it difficult to create? I don't know. Of course, I am turning again and again to the ocean like I always do in my art. What are you finding that you're drawn to? I'm curious, so definitely let me know. Are you finding that you're wanting to be creative in different ways than you were before lockdown or before isolation? And I always say art is the best therapy. It really is for me. I know I always feel better after I create, after I paint, after I sketch, after I color. I don't know, I just feel like more centered every time. And I hope that all of you are finding time to be creative and finding ways to center yourself as well. I recently did some coloring pages for anybody who wasn't feeling like they, could find that spot of creativity. I guess I thought maybe it might help people who just weren't feeling overly creative themselves, but who could benefit from some color therapy. Coloring has been shown to actually alter the fear center in the brain and just provide a sense of calm. And so I did a couple of coloring pages, which I've offered for free on my website. If you want to download them, you can just print them and feel free to color them and tag me on social media. If you do it, I will leave that linked below so that you can go and download them. They are ocean-based. One of them is seaweed and seashells. It's like moon snail shells, kind of an not abstract, kind of a graphic depiction of a moon snail shell, my interpretation. And the other one is mussel shells and a different type of seaweed. If you download them and color them or paint them or use markers on them or however you want to use them, and you want to share them with me, please definitely tag me in on social media and I will share them on my Instagram stories. So I often find that when I'm painting, I don't know, something takes over and I'm like often drawn to including all the details, all those little details. But I find that when I can achieve a looseness in my painting, that it's really relaxing for me. And it's almost like I've been to the beach. It's almost like I feel like I've had a trip to the ocean, and I feel like all of those feelings that I get from actually being at the ocean, I think are replicated when I actually paint the ocean. And that's why, that people ask me a lot why I paint the ocean again and again and again. And I think that's why I do it. When I paint it, I feel like I've actually had a trip to the ocean. So I'm really just trying to keep things loose here. I'm trying to really pay attention to the light in my reference photo. I haven't followed it exactly. I've really just used it as a loose reference. But yeah, I'm just kind of looking at the the light and how it's hitting these big boulders that are in the foreground here, and just kind of trying to get a bit of shading in to give the illusion of the rocks and the water kind of flowing in around the rocks. Do you all love seeing the waves crash over the rocks as much as I do, and seeing the translucency and the transparency and that aqua color that is created as the wave, crashes up into the air? I don't know, there's just something about that color that instantly reduces my heart rate. So yeah, I'm just really trying to make sure that that I've got a nice contrast in the rocks, and make sure that I've got enough difference in value in my colors, just to get a nice contrast in there and to bring enough visual interest. And I want to make sure that I have enough variance in color there with my aquas to make sure that there's a sense of depth in the wave, that part of the wave is back further and part of the wave is moving toward us. So that's why I'm adding the really light aqua in there. So I've noticed a lot of people being creative in different ways to how they might normally be creative. Like I see a lot of people baking, and actually I'm a baker. I love to bake as well, and I've been baking so much bread. There's this really beautiful artisan bread recipe that you just leave to sit. You mix it up and leave it to sit on your counter overnight, and then you bake it in a Dutch oven. I'm going to leave that linked below too, because some of you might really enjoy it. It's super easy and it's so good. And I've actually been adding like cinnamon sugar to it and rolling it up and making this gorgeous cinnamon bread, and it's just so delicious. I can't make it fast enough. My family just eats it before I can even bake another loaf. So do you guys have a favorite recipe that you're making right now? I would love to hear about it down below. I'd love to give it a try. I mean, we have some time on our hands. We might as well try out some new recipes, right? So yeah, I'll leave that bread one linked below. And if you have any questions about how I make the cinnamon version, definitely let me know, because it's something that I just sort of made up. But yeah, it's super easy, and I find it to be a really adaptable loaf of bread. I mean, if you like a savory loaf, you could add rosemary or thyme in there. It's just so good. So these videos so far have been more like, I guess, come and paint with me, come hang out with me, bring your knitting, bring your painting, bring your coloring, bring whatever you want, and let's just chill and hang out. But I'm wondering if a tutorial would be something that you're actually interested in. I don't know, would you like to have a seascape tutorial? Like I'll actually paint a specific seascape and be very directive in the tutorial, and step by step, and these are the materials that you'll need, these are the exact colors. Is that something that you'd be interested in? If so, definitely let me know in the comments below, and I can try to make that happen for you. So any of you who are from like the area in and around Halifax or from Nova Scotia, and you may be familiar with Crystal Crescent, this is sort of loosely based on the area that is after the second beach, just before you get to the Pennant Point hiking trail. And it's sort of looking out toward, I think it's the island out there, and I think it's Sambro Lighthouse out on the island. I'm really looking forward to being able to get back out into nature and just be able to, get back out to the coast and start hiking again. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I hope it happens soon. One of my favorite parts about painting waves is always when I get to the part that I start to bring in like the white paint to kind of bring in those, the froth and the foam of the crashing waves. I just feel like the painting really starts to come alive when I get to that point. I guess it just starts to feel more finished when the white starts to go on there. And I think that there's a lot of fun in kind of splashing on that white and being really haphazard about it, because that's the way waves crash. You know, there's a certain randomness to the way a wave crashes. There's no real patterns in those, like the wave spray and in the froth. I mean, there are patterns, but they're not set patterns. They're kind of random and a little bit wild. So I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes and just let you guys watch the waves come to life. In order to get that really splashy, wavy feeling, I really like to do some splatters on top of the waves, but to keep that splatter from going everywhere, I'm using some parchment paper and I'm just placing it on the work to limit the amount of splash that goes everywhere. And I just load up my brush with some fairly wet white acrylic paint, and I'm just hitting it against another brush and letting the splatter go randomly wherever it kind of feels like it. And that pretty much does it for these two pieces. I was really happy with that loose feel that I was able to achieve with these ones. And as I take the tape off here, you can see how they flow really well together as a diptych, but also could stand alone as individual pieces. Thanks for watching today and listening to my somewhat random musings about isolation and creativity. Don't forget to check out my free coloring pages, which are linked below, as well as the bread recipe. And leave me some recipes. I would love to give them a try. And stop back by here again soon to see what else I'm up to in my studio. Thanks for watching and stay well.